When I was 10, I helped my neighbor put in an in-ground pool, and I helped break up his backyard patio with a sledgehammer in 1980. He also helped save my house from burning down when he carried out a burning bed that I had, played with matches.
The world's a tough place. So I think that's probably was probably a good learning edge in those formative years.
The world is always changing. It's just a matter of degree and your position in it. How can you flex so much that you don't break? Your first information that you get, you must consume, act, and be transparent, but you must also assume it's almost probably wrong. People trust in bad times because that's when things really matter, like in the foxhole. You can have lots of good things happen. If you kind of screw someone at that moment, it's over. Because the only moment that actually exists is now. You could project, but that day may not even come. That day is not even here. If you take that data, you learn and you roll it forward, that's maybe wisdom.
It's what you put your attention on expands. Failure is a feature, not a bug. Brad, I am beyond delighted to welcome you to an episode of Stratospheric Leaders. You and I first met back in September 2021. It was just, I think, as we were coming out of COVID. And Lance Ugler suggested we meet because I wrote a book, Stratospheric CEOs. He was one of the leaders I profiled. And he wanted me to speak to some of his trusted tribe to get their perspective on him. And you and I have become firm friends. We speak regularly. You are my sounding board. You are my trusted advisor. You played an integral part in the launch of my book, Stratospheric CEO. So I know from our conversations how much value and insight I take away. So I'm truly excited for the audience to hear your lessons and your learnings. And when I think of you, there are so many words that come up, but energy is one of them. I think you have the most infectious energy. You are somebody that I gravitate to, and it's matched with you are a bold thinker. And that's the piece you catalyze my thinking. And you are one of the most respected voices in fintech, having spent, I'm not going to ask you how many decades, but a number of decades at the intersection of finance and technology. So we're going to dive straight in because there is so much to cover. And I, first of all, that people can, will look you up on LinkedIn. Many people know you. I said, there's a distinguished career here. And I really want to take it way back to when you, again, as a child, what was your first ever job before Wall Street even was on a dot on the horizon for you?
Yeah, so I had a lot of jobs, actually. I grew up in upstate New York a bit. And I guess when I was 10, I helped my neighbor put in an in-ground pool, and I helped break up his backyard patio with a sledgehammer in 1980. That was hard. He also helped save my house from burning down when he carried out a burning bed that I had, played with matches. So he was a cop, and that was I think I got paid $2 a day. I was a camp kid. I did some tennis instructing. That was probably not really work. But then I worked at 4 or 5 places at the Woodbury Commons, Van Heusen, when it first opened in the mid-'80s in upstate New York. I worked at Sterling Forest as a ski lift operator and maintenance. I worked gas station, car wash, propane fill. I worked at Bear Mountain as a maintenance person and then fought forest fires. I was and then I was a landscaper, sort of my last summer before going to college. Then I took a job in university as a sophomore doing research on municipal finance, which I sort of stumbled into. And that was, I would say, the job I had that put me into the markets ultimately in 92.
Like a varied jobs there from Woodbury Commons, which I used to love going to when I stayed with my brother to get all the great discounted.
When it opened in 85, the only brand name there was Van Heusen. Everything else was generic. So now it's not the Woodbury Commons you knew. It was a relatively depressing outdoor mall, to be honest.
Well, and where you said, so you nearly burnt your house down. I'm thinking with
that was
matches.
Playing with matches. Yeah, put it in, put it out, put it in, put it out, gets away. Kind of that never happened. And fortunately, I lived around a lot of cops and firemen, so they all came. They put it out. They carried the bed out, and disaster avoided. My parents were out to dinner. My sister was home with me, and I think I might have said the boiler blew up as some answer that might have caused the fire. I don't think I knew what a boiler was at the time, to be honest.
And you know what? We are going to come to this later in our conversation, but it's who you surround yourself with matters. And it sounds like even in your childhood, you surrounded yourself with good people. And the other
just to say on that, because I don't mean to interrupt. I grew up with an interesting crowd. Not everybody was nice. It wasn't a tough crowd. It wasn't the mean streets, but it was, there were people on the edge, and, we didn't have a lot to do living 5 miles away from a store. We rode our bikes, we went into the woods, and, there were some nutty guys I grew up with a bit. I was always on the edge of that, to be honest, never in it, but, it certainly gave me perspective and maybe toughened up slightly.
Well, the world's a tough place. So I think that's probably was probably a good learning edge in those formative years.
Absolutely.
And what really struck me is and you and I have spoken about this before, hard work is a minimum. And I really hear that coming through from the jobs you had, growing up. What did you dream of becoming before finance and technology beckoned?
I think at a young age, maybe, what does the 7-year-old Brad dream of? I dreamed of being taller and maybe having not a bowl haircut, like really very, I didn't need Dorothy Hamill's haircut, whatever, if you know that figure skater. But, it was just, I just wanted to be in with things, and I liked to be in the mix, and it didn't matter if it was baseball or anything, right? Alone time was great. I'm quite good at being alone. But I just wanted to be with people, I guess. And it wasn't like my dad was in finance. I thought I'd be an accountant. That was kind of the path I went to SUNY Albany, which was mentoring CPAs at the Big Six for years. And I kind of went into being an accountant. I realized there's a bit of art there. And then I stumbled into bonds and munis as research. And I'm like, there's a bit more math than sort of discounted cash flow curves and financing hospitals and bridges. And so that was I was going to be a sort of a business person is my guess. Most of my friends were sort of going different directions, maybe cop, firemen, maybe go to college, some, then I had a few that would become an eye doctor, et cetera. So it was more generic, be lawyer, be eye doctor, be accountant. And I was going to be an accountant because my dad was a controller and a credit manager in, the meat business.
And I'm curious about, growing up. So, the pathway could have been accountant. You ended up, you said, in the muni space. When you look back on your childhood, what's a piece of advice somebody gave you that stayed with you? And and who was it who gave you that advice?
It's probably relax. I have energy. That's a known thing. I'm not sure where it comes from or why. It's fine. It's just something that I have. And it's, like all forms of energy, they could be used in different directions at different times and to different degrees of success. Or if you think of the word nuclear energy, that has two sides to it in terms of its power. So I think that is something I've always had. I was a small kid. I was shorter than my bubby and my mother at my bar mitzvah. And they were not tall. I was 4 feet 8 inches at my bar mitzvah. I wrestled in the 78-pound weight class in 8th grade and 7th grade. I had forfeits half the time because they didn't have humans that were that small. So, but I grew up, playing basketball and football and baseball and killed a guy and whatever these games are. And it was just all of that. So it was like but at the same time, it's like that made me something that could probably go into that world a bit, but I need to relax.
And out of interest, is that a piece of advice that you still have to remind yourself of today? Because the world, the world's moving faster than ever before. I feel like relax is a message we could all really benefit from reminding ourselves of.
I think we've spoken before. So yes, I definitely need, it's super active out there. There's lots going on in the world. I mean, just turn on the television every hour and there's something new and fascinating. So in my world, in my little bubble in the last 3-5 years, it's had, quite a bit going on. So, there's no more important time for me to be more relaxed, more persistent, more quiet.
And you referenced there, some of the changes, just the current backdrop. And I think we can all agree that, change is normal. Our grandparents, our great-grandparents, they all lived through periods of change. It feels like we're in this period of exponential change, whether it's the, data, technology, climate change, geopolitical, the regulatory landscape. Things are changing, and you're a CEO of Symphony. And leaders, more is being asked of them than ever before. And I often find, I hear people saying, we want our leaders to be authentic. We want them to be vulnerable. We want them to bring their full selves into work. And yet there's that tightrope that leaders walk, because yes, it's about being authentic, and there's some things that you can't bring your full self because everyone's looking to you for calmness, for confidence, for certainty. So how do you be who you are, being authentic whilst fulfilling the responsibility of the seat?
Right. So maybe there's bringing yourself, but not all of your words and actions, which is different. People would assume bringing their whole self as they are exactly who they are in all situations. But there are times where you could bring yourself and modify your words and actions to fit better with the other side of the conversation. At Market, we actually did a program called Emergenetics, which was about that profiling and the color wheel, and it's all fascinating in the tests you do. But the reality is, I find the world and human, we're all a Tetris, right? So we all fit together better or worse. Why do we love Legos? It's probably something like that. Beehives. There's an element of, hexagons that fit together perfectly in all places in the world made by beehives. That's kind of remarkable. If you just think about that. Legos probably exist for a reason, and Tetris is addictive in Candy Crush because it's that fit. So how do you fit with people without forcing people to fit? Sometimes it's just square peg round or the wrong time, and you just kind of have to call it that way and not be too frustrated by that. I probably get a bit frustrated in that. When things don't fit, can't we just make it a bit smoother or chop that thing off to put it together? And it may be right. It just may be the wrong time, or it may have been, what happened a few years ago, and it's not the thing that's the forward.
You and I always like our alliteration, and I had the F's here. How do you fit without, forcing? And I put flex, so it feels, the importance of flex there, because it's about flexing. As I listen to you, it's like, what does the situation demand of me? Who's the audience? So therefore, how do I need to be? What do I need to dial up, dial down? And being really deliberate and intentional, if that's how I'm understanding it. Yeah,
flex is a really interesting word, right? Because you can flex. People, you've got the flex muscle, right? That's a word. You're flexing.
Yeah.
Right. That was a flex. That's like a term today, I think, in the kids' vernacular, maybe. Right. I had a program in Market these strategic planning methods where I'd flex 18. And I had these, I named things through the years, and it was flex 18, and it was how you get flex, power, clarity. How do you flex to develop more power, to have more clarity? And that was kind of that 3-year plan that I was trying to develop, where we had good ideas for the prior 3 years, and how do we take this into the wild, but still have good software flex, good human flex. If the world is always changing. It's just a matter of degree and your position in it. So how can you flex so much that you don't break? But sometimes that does come back, and you have to kind of go the other direction. And it's, as you know, I had a retina tear last week, and I had laser surgery on Monday. I figured out through the process, it's just, I'm nearsighted, and because of that strain, you lose a bit of flex, and your retina just has a small tear. And so my retina is less flexible now, as all maybe old people, and more so with nearsighted folk. So I can take it in any direction, but there's nothing more important than being flexible. And there's nothing more important than not flexing sometimes, just to play with the words, sometimes.
And you love your yoga. I know yoga's something that I'm sure is part of, for you, sustainable, keeping yourself fit for purpose. And there's an element of flex there that really, the importance of flex.
Yeah, and that is probably the 5th thing you get from yoga. Interestingly, everybody says, I will only do yoga to get flexible, and I can't do yoga because I'm not flexible, and guys don't do yoga because they don't care about flexibility. And so I'm thinking of a business. How do you solve for that? But it's a mind quieter at the core, which is why I've been in it for 12 years religiously. It's much more of the mind quieter. Actually develops a lot more strength than you realize. You do 60 chaturangas in an hour with Ben, my yogi, because it's his 60th birthday. So he does one chaturanga on his birthday. So it's 55 on his 55th. That's a lot of chaturangas in a yoga class when you're also doing yoga. For those push-ups, doing handstands, you develop a lot of strength, and you even develop a lot of, your blood flow from your toes to your brow, and then the flexibility sort of comes like almost as an extra.
I think the mind quieter you mentioned, like we all need a space for the mind, mind to be quiet. And I've got my snow globe here. I often use my snow globe because I talk about in the midst like of a snowstorm, you can't see clearly. And I talk about the snow globe where if every snowflake represents a conversation, a meeting, an item on your to-do list, just an ask of you, like when it's shaken up, it's very difficult to see with that clarity, with purpose, where, once you let this snow settle, you can see the path forward. Right. And I think it's the same. We all need those mind quieters, and it will look differently for everyone. But it's
I'll alliterate with you: finding focus through the fog, and finding friends through the fog, right? And how do you just reach out, knowing there's the touch there that you just can't see, but somebody's kind of pulling you through that light, just to be super, goofy, I guess, but. It is that, and there's so much fog out there. I mean, there's fog between on-premise technology and the cloud. Technologists call that the fog, the place between your building and the cloud you're trying to build to. And most things break in the fog, right? When you're in yoga, you don't hurt yourself in a position, you tend to hurt yourself moving between positions.
Yeah. It reminds me, actually, just listening to you there. So one of our mutual friends, Doug Sifu, he's recently had a hip replacement. And he spoke to the fact, I said, what do you wish your younger self had known? What would you tell yourself? He goes, I wish I'd done my hip flexors. Because at the time, he's like, I haven't got time. And actually, his older self would have said, you know what? You make time to be flexible.
Well, I just send him a nice congrats on the second Stanley Cup victory, which is kind of amazing.
I know, that's incredible.
But now I have to also send him, I need to get you into yoga because you would not have had that hip replacement. Maybe. Some people would argue you would have had it sooner because yoga can hurt you if you go to, overextend. Women, I would say, tend to open and overextend. Men tend to crumble in on themselves because they work their arms and their legs. Their belly gets big, so you see old man walking down the street. They're crumpled. Women are very upright, but they sort of get a bit more. They're a bit more open and then brittle. Where men are strong, but they kind of cave in. And you could see an 80-year-old man and woman walking together, 60, and they literally look like the shape that you did your abs when you were 18, and you never thought about your core forever.
Which again goes back to the point of being deliberate and thoughtful, because again, thinking ahead, going back to leading through periods of exponential change. And I often refer to it as turbulent times. I've seen many people who see it as opportunity. It's like, seize the day. It's, you work the crisis to your advantage. And so there's a certain, for me, like an arsenal of skills that are required to lead in today's world. I haven't yet read it. I have ordered it on Amazon. And there's a book by I think it's called McRaven, on how you conquer a crisis. And the reason I've ordered it is because when you make recommendations, I'm like, right, I have to, okay, here's the book. So I've got a hardback copy coming. And because you speak so highly of the book, okay, you've got to, and I love the fact you said about making the bed as well. That's one of the things, the first things to do is it's listed on the front of his book. But you shared with me, it was a great book. And what resonated most, because I haven't yet read it, what have you taken away?
Yeah. So, crisis is always happening. Like in all parts of the world, there's sometimes a crisis. Right now, there just happens to be a lot happening simultaneously. Thomas Friedman's book in 17 talked about this age of accelerations with globalization, climate, and tech. And there's these three mega trends hitting. And because we're such a small human, we're overwhelmed. But maybe if we think about it, try to use it, get on top of it, you can almost ride that wave. So I visualize myself riding these massive volatile waves as I surf. Not snorkel and not scuba. And the seaplanes, by the way, are more when you're in trouble and you have to surveil for bodies like I know we'll talk about that a little bit later, but so the crisis moment is like who you work with in regular times may not be the people you work with in crisis times. Your first information that you get, you must consume, act, and be transparent, but you must also assume it's almost probably wrong. So you're in a very not deterministic outcome decision-making, or much less, highly probabilistic. So this might happen if we do this. There's plenty of stuff on television right now that is crisis with probabilities being made. 10 years ago was more, this is going to happen if we do that. It's a little bit like agentic AI. There's agents, right? They could be highly understood, very simple. You know it's going to work as long as the tech is tested, and you can make that autonomous yesterday. You do 3 of those, you string them together, that's a nice thing. There's plenty of stuff that is probabilistic. And even things that we think are deterministic, like eggs are bad for you, is actually maybe not as true as we thought 30 years ago.
I think what really struck me, and I think it's worthy of underscoring, the people who you surround yourself with in times of crisis might be different to the people in more fair winds or more normalized times. When you think about the people you surround yourself with in times of where there's a lot happen simultaneously, you're riding that volatile wave, what are the characteristics or qualities you look for in the people you want to be around?
I mean, at the base, are you someone who tends to kind of hurt people in a tough time? Right. And I have this formula about, the good times and bad times. You build trust in bad times because that's when things really matter, like in the foxhole. You can have lots of good things happen. If you kind of screw someone at that moment, it's over. There's just that element of, and it's a little bit like just over time, you go through life and you have experiences and you sort of just know where that trust lies truly. And those are the people you want to be with in crisis times. I have my rabbis, my people, my 20 people on the planet. You're in my bubble. I speak to you often. I've got lots of stuff going on in my life. And it is, I would say, I would take an even more sort of strident view that the team you work with in crisis is absolutely not going to be the team in total that you would work with in a normal environment, a BAU. It's not that everybody changes, but you almost always have to assume if we're in a crisis mode, something needs to change. Because it would be too odd to say, that Toyota Camry driving me to work is just fine when there's 4 feet of water. It actually isn't. You kind of need a Ford F-350 diesel pickup truck, which I bought in 2009 because I was concerned about things and I wanted to make sure I had options in all situations. That was a stupid thing maybe, but it was fun. I wanted a pickup truck in my life because why wouldn't I? I had Matchbox cars, Tonka toys. So that was I'm thinking, how could I be more prepared about 2009 about things that might be coming, having been through 2008, having been through 2001, having been through 87 crash personally I got interested in the markets, by the way, because my dad was trading stocks like everybody and it didn't go as well in 87. So like these moments of crisis that you learn from, Michael Jordan learns from all of his missed shots. Every professional person I've ever heard, Lance, all these folks say, I learn more from my mistakes in crisis times than anything. And that's just, fortunately, I've had enough of that where I just know sort of who you're supposed to be with at the right times in the right place. Maybe.
And the word you said, and the word you said there is trust. And it reminds me of Warren Buffett's quote where it's, he says it takes 20 years to build a reputation. It can take 5 minutes to destroy it based on action. And by the way, nobody likes a good crisis like Warren. No.
He loves a crisis. He loves crisis mode because people can't deal as much. And then he's, there's the buyers of cheap assets in crisis time, or there's the buyer of new business when the fog is there and you can build a business because there's so few people that can even see.
Yeah.
Like the fog of times usually creates amazing innovation. It's a tough time, but it could be a terrific time when you look back on it in terms of what we've achieved in science.
Tough time or terrific time. See, I like the T's that are coming out there.
Yes.
And we mentioned there about crises. Yes, we look at the world around us professionally. How it's influencing what we do as leaders of organizations. And you just referenced there. You're going through. Let's not call it a crisis, but stuff at home. Your wife is dealing with.
No, it's a crisis. Let's just call it what it is.
It is, your wife.
My wife has cancer. So
yeah.
People that know, if anybody wants to, ping me and me, I'm happy to, take a note saying, happy vibes. So yeah, that is, we're in a bit of a crisis moment and I could take the C cubed and run it through that.
Speak to the C cube then. And look, I've never met Marcy, but I feel like I know her because you
do.
And so know that my good vibes are being sent over to her.
So we have our S cubed, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a bit, but C cubed came out in the last year sort of for me, which is contain, converge, and collaborate. It was actually written, Shani Bizarre picked it up in an article she wrote about how do you contain risk, converge technologies, and collaborate more to get to this sort of, quantum future, whatever that means. So there's an element of contain, converge, collab there. If I think about what we're dealing with my wife and cancer, the whole goal is to contain it. And then you take all these things that are going on and you converge them together. This is a blood cancer. It's a stem cell harvest. It's a kill of a system. It's a full refresh. It's a reset of your whole biology. Vaccines coming, it's amazing. What I saw, by the way, this is not amazing, just to put the wrong word on this point. But when I saw how the centrifuge worked, and centrifuges are being talked about today, I just started following CERN on Instagram because centrifuges are on my mind. When you spin your blood and you can separate the plasma from the stems and collect those precious stem cells, that's like a real technology that's only around for 10 or 20 years now. And that's amazing because that's, for me, that containment we did for the last 6 months and that convergence of technologies in the last 3 that I saw physically hit and actually saving life of wife, it's breathtaking. And I know all these technologies are going to span across all of these things, including our little, finance, chat, voice telephone world. Not in the biggest way, oh my God, but these things are all horizontal things. AI is one layer of that, but there's so much more that's coming fast.
Well,
but it's all good. I've got, and by the way, community people, I get so many notes saying good vibes every time you come to me. That's your first. And, it's all good. By the way, it's going really well. And, process and the science is working. And, within a year or 2, I think we're really in the rearview mirror.
And
i.e. Sal Narrow.
Yeah, I was going to say that reminds me. I remember Sal's a mutual friend of both of us, Sal Narrow, and I remember him speaking to, in terms of not just crisis, but in life in general. There's a reason he said that the rearview mirror is much smaller than the windshield. So, always be looking through the wind. Most of your attention, the windshield. Is that something you subscribe to as well?
Well, just to reflect on Sal a bit, who is truly one of my favorite humans on planet. He's a really unique guy. And I've seen his evolution as a human over many years, in a good way. He's just amazing. 2005-06, we were all together, looming into a financial crisis. We were at dinners and he was animated in a good way. We really have to solve some of this. And I saw him, in that moment. That's not rearview mirror. That wasn't forward. That was the present moment. We're all, at a dinner looking at the markets and the volatility and conference not getting done and credit default swaps in 05 and 6, basic stuff that we did get on top of. But, now I look back today, the rearview mirror is anxiety inducing. That's like a scientific psychological fact. I think I've read that. Sorry, it's depressing. Yeah. Back is depressing. Forward is anxiety, right? Which is why presence is actually super important because the only moment that actually exists is now. You could project, but that day may not even come. And you could look back, but that day is not even here. And I would argue, and not to use this word for myself, but if you take that data, you learn and you roll it forward, that's maybe wisdom.
And I think where you said that just really, hit a nerve in terms of the importance of it. We only have the present moment. We can plan for the future, but you don't want to live in the future. I think it's recognizing what is the unmet future and what do I need to do to move myself to that space. We talk about Lance, or Henry Fernandez, they can, that they spoke about, I interpreted it as being able to see the unmet future, but it's then, bringing that back to, okay, so what do we need to be thinking about now, present moment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 10-3-1-92.
Speak to that. Cause I love your, you're a framework person. Speak to, because that,
I am.
In our first conversation, you mentioned that I remember busy scribing to be like, this is such a good framework.
So as you know, I have this book and I've been writing in them for now 11, 12 years. So in, 2015, I'd left Goldman in 11, 12. I'd been at market for 3 years and I thought, okay, what does 10 years out look like? What does 2025 literally look like? A 10-year dream. But it's a dream because it's a dream. It can only be a dream state. It's too far to run a business. It's too far to talk to most people. It's just too far out unless you're with maybe your family and you're thinking, where could we be living? And that's fun. But businesses mostly can't run close to that marker. 3 years is that vision line to me, which is where good, sustainable, long-term businesses run to that 3-year vision pretty perpetually. One is that 1-year plan you have to have. It's called the budget, right? 90 days is that mark every quarter that you measure your result, and then the 2-week sprint. So 10-3-1-92, 10-year dream, 3-year vision, 1 year to plan, 90 days to focus and measure, and 2-week sprints. Now, depending on the time, like I'm more of a 3-year vision, 90 days to measure. I think we might be in a time where it's more of a 1-year plan with a 2-week sprint. Like, how do you really nail that plan? You're still measuring because everybody has a quarter to mark. Like, that's the public world. It's how we measure. It's the seasons. If you live in places with seasons like I do. London, I know has them. So like that. But now, I am personally shifting. I'm generally a 390 guy. I'm now running more to probably 1-2. I'm focusing myself in the week that are mattering to the months that are adding up to the quarters that become your 12-month result. The result is still an outcome. You really have to be just like, bring that, if you're skiing, sometimes you really do have to look 10 feet in front of you. You can't be so far down the mountain because you just need a bit of touch.
Yeah, I've used this word several times in our conversation, but I love the intentionality of it. I love the structure of it because it feels that just gives it. I feel like it's like building a house. You've got foundations, you've got there's a plan. It's like all of those components are equally as important to make that dream a reality.
I mean, it's exactly the way I think about it. I grew up as a muni power banker in the 90s, right? I was getting deals done to build power plants. I got really interested in power. I understood cogeneration facilities and hydro and nuclear and geothermal. And I'm like, wow. And, energy is great, as we talked about. But, if you have energy without a framework, like that's like, where is your power? Where's your containment? Where's your compartmentalization? Like I have an innovation formula I've worked on, which I've talked to you about with trust and passion. And that to me is a foundational thing. And you could apply it to your life and your business. Like, how do you innovate your way forward as a human, taking leaps in good and bad times, having experiences with people and building that trust. And then with passion, you can take that trust with passion, and then you take tech and relationships and put it in the mix. And that's the foundation, right? This 10-3-1-92 is my framework of time management. I call it my lifetiming framework, my LTF. And it's now on version 3.0, which and it's expanded to 10 numbers. But to make the point on the expansion, so in 2022, after 2015, I added 60, 10-3-1-90, 62, 60-day burst to hit your 90-day mark. So when you're in sales, it's like, let's burst for 60 so we hit the quarter, right? If it's July 4th, let's run for 60 days because we know it gets a bit darker after July 4th. So like, how do you get that energy up just to hit that mark? And so I added 60 in front of the 90. I added 40, 10-3-1-90, 62 at that same time because I wanted a 40-year cycle in my head for 2 generations of humans. And so I just build out over time. It's like a scaffolding that builds a framework. And now I've got a much 987, 60, 55, 40, 10-3-1-90, 62, which is 10 numbers. I said it fast because I say it in my mind a lot. But that just takes me out to 60 years, 3 generations, where I just believe that's when big change happens on the planet. When it's both new humans that want to just do it and don't care what the old world was, and you sort of maybe even repeat some of the mistakes because you forgot the old lessons.
Yeah.
Maybe more of that these days. Time will tell.
But you work closely with Lance, and he talks about measuring everything. When he talked about, and it's what you put your attention on expands. So I'm seeing such parallels here between you both have such robust frameworks for measurement to really make sure, are we on the right track? What's the overarching ambition? Are we on the right track? And then measuring yourself against that execution.
I'll give you an example of that. And so my frameworks tend to be a bit higher level, more general, that I truly try to apply to my life. I'll give you an example of a framework. We had a KPI at Market when we worked. It was client touches. We needed to do 50 a month, 150 a quarter, and 600 a year as execs. We had to actually have that many touches, and we had to record it and put it in a spreadsheet. We didn't do that. It was going to hit our performance and our payout. So we had a hard KPI, and that's, you talk about 50 real client, like it could be a call, a meeting, something that you're generating an outside. You could have people generally sitting around, not doing as much. And if you think activity is a symptom of success, I know Eric Maldonado does, because I've worked with that guy for a long time, and he has high activity, lots of calls, lots of sales, lots of meetings, lots of relationships, lots of revenue. So that was a hardcore KPI we had to measure every 90 days. Did you do your 150 client touches?
And it's that to me.
By the way, I have a little PTSD, just maybe a tiny bit of how do you force maybe 150 client touches when salespeople actually want to be in front of their clients.
But relationships are so critical, and it is a hardcore KPI. It is, and I'm sure the benefits of that were paid back in multiples in terms of.
And the genius of that KPI, by the way, it's an input output, right? Everybody would say my KPI is my EBITDA, my revenue, my sales, my growth, it's actually activity with purpose and good timing. And maybe timing is the hardest element to nail. As we talked, it's the hardest resource to preserve because you physically can't.
So let's speak to that then. If time is the hardest, one of the hardest resources to preserve, how do you manage yours?
Well, my calendar, specifically, I have 8 color categories. Like I know I do about 800 hours a year physically flying in the air. I know there's 8,500 hours in a year. I know 3,000 of those hours are not really travel time because it's summer or holiday. So there's 5,500 hours in a year. I'm flying 800 of them. Not, 800 over 5,500. That's a lot of time physically in the air. That said, the beauty is a I multitask a bit. So if I'm on a plane to Tokyo for 14 hours, I'm doing 4 hours of work. I might have seen 3 movies that I then write in the book. I watch a movie, I quote, I then hit you on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
So like even that 14 hours of time coming back from Tokyo, here's the beauty of the Tokyo flight. 14 hours, you take off at 3 p.m. on Friday, you watch 3 movies, you do 3 hours of work summaries of the cool meetings you had, you land at the same time in New York. It's for me, it's so mind-bending. I get confused by time easily because it is confusing, I think. And I think we're starting to understand maybe elements of how this thing works over the span of a universe. Marcy would not like this frame because I'm playing a fake scientist right now. But like, that is like amazing to me. And when I started to go more to Asia and back, I'm like, wow. And if you live on Mars and you go around the sun, how old are you? Like, what's a year? It's not the same time. Time is a measurement from a fixed position on a place we know, which is Earth. And then we could do degrees over a curved surface with a straight line making a triangle. Like these are like mathematical, geometrical truisms that we know. How does that relate to me flying from Tokyo and getting 5 things done, but actually landing at the same time? And because I don't need a lot of sleep, I didn't sleep a lot on the plane because it's day, because I'm flying. I land at 3 p.m. on Friday and hang out at my house, go out that night, wake up Saturday morning, same time. And it's literally like I got 367 days that year.
And tell me your 8, do you know what your 8 color coded, is it your assistant that does your 8 color coded? Or do you know, like, how do you bucket things?
So in my email inbox, which unfortunately for the first time in my life, I have an assistant in my inbox. I have such a tough time keeping up. So in that world, it's reply, review, task waiting in some Workday system. So there's like 4 or 5 categories in my email that are color coded. My calendar is red is external meetings, blue is internal meetings. My exec board meetings are purple. My travel is light purple. So I have 8 colors and when I look at my wheel of my Google Calendar, I know I spent 842 hours physically in purple. But I also know I know that there's many more hours than that because I'm doing multiple things at multiple times. And my team knows when I fly, I'm reading, I'm active, I'm looking at LinkedIn. People generally know when I fly because I'm active.
And I love what you said there around the wheel of Google Calendar, because I suppose the data doesn't lie. Well, it could lie, but it gives you, even if it's a good, or just an overview representation, in order that you can be like, okay, well, if we go back to the market measurement, one of the activity measures is, 50 client touch points a month. You can very quickly see, if that's, what you set yourself as a target, all your time is in internal meetings, well then
So let me give you 3 just visuals that just were so good for me. Yellow is personal on my calendar, and gray is a block of time.
Okay.
And those are on my calendar. I need time Friday, whatever it is. So I need to see more yellow in general, whatever, like yoga Saturday morning. And believe me, I'm right with you, Sonny. So you're so bright. Your colors are always like, I love it. It's amazing. So that is real. And then I would say 3 or 4 years ago at Symphony, probably like 40% external, 60% internal. Because we were just, a lot going on coming out of COVID, really trying to just get things, into that. And now I'm probably 80-20 external because I could see my calendar is just much more red.
Yeah. And I go back to, what we put our attention on expands, like measure things and, the right things, and things will improve. You mentioned on your Tokyo flights that you'll sometimes, watch 3 movies. What is one film that you've watched that's had a very powerful, I don't know if it's a leadership lesson, a lesson in life that's stayed with you?
So this book has a lot of movie quotes. Probably the ancient one from Doctor Strange, where we're all in this river, whether you like it or not. That current exists, whether you like it or not. There's energy in that current, whether you like it or not. If you fight that, you're probably going to sink pretty quickly. But if you allow that river to become part of you, or you somehow relax a bit, you're in it. So we're all in that sort of river. You're never on the side. Everybody says the man in the arena. Well, everybody's in the arena. FYI. So, and I love the idea that we're all in this stream, and you kind of have to relax or sometimes take that energy forward. So that's a really important quote. And I love the whole Doctor Strange kind of the whole idea of it. That's probably my favorite of all of those movies generally. But then I would say, I think it was Fury, ideas are peaceful, history is violent, which sounds horrible, but I'd like more data that says that's less true. We all have, most of us people that are pretty good. I think we're good. We don't like people to be feeling bad physically anyway. Like that's a peaceful idea. But even us peaceful folks can sometimes, be a bit, more aggressive, right? So ideas are generally quite peaceful. Not all ideas. I hear a lot of ideas that are not peaceful, but let's assume but history has a lot more to it than that track. Yeah. And that's just a very kind of yin yang, be careful what you wish for, or cycles, kind of repeat type stuff.
And I love what you said, the Doctor Strange one, because if I think of the river, the stream you mentioned, I think of a river as having lots of different tributaries. And sometimes when we're trying to go against the current or we're going too fast, we don't always see the tributaries. So there's something there for me about that, going with flow. And it's the kind of the hurry up and slow down. It's slowing down so you can see, and you're not missing some potential amazing opportunities or serendipitous, these meaningful collisions.
Yeah, we had a riff the other day on that, move fast, break things versus move slow with intention. And maybe that the balance of moving slow with intention allows you to also have presence at the same time.
Yeah.
If you're moving, you're arguably not present. But if you move with intention and slow, maybe you actually are present and moving at the same time. So I think that's really important. Have you ever gone tubing down a river? I'm definitely assuming the answer is no, given.
No.
Okay. So in America, there are times where you're in a river tubing with people. Like you're all in these tubes and you're just linked together and you're just wandering down a river and you're in some place. It could be in the South. It could be anywhere in America. There's lots of places. There are river parks where you go to rides, right? So sometimes like you're with your kids and like they're floating off over there. And it's like, yes. And it's that fog point where you have to find your way through it. But then there's that people around you that, your daughter's like floating off and she's just going to get caught in those sticks, or it's a real ugly area. There's actually like a little animal on the edge there. Like, so you're in that river and you just nudge. And it's like, I think about that a lot. Like those growing up and again, like there are places in America where they literally do this like every week. They go river tubing and just hang out with beers on floats and tube away. I see that in Boca, Florida, in the Boca Lake, which is a totally different version of that. Just people hanging out in boats, with drinks, basically on tubes. So that's like, that's that river, how you kind of loop that all around. I bring back a little of my childhood and, I'm sure you have versions of that in places that you've grown up in life.
I'm not sure that I do, but I feel like I want to go tubing. And
have you been skiing? Skiing, right? You got your family. It's a river. You're like, don't go to the edges, get out of the trees, watch that tree well. It's all the same. You could, a river is a mountain, it's all the same kind of vibe.
And you talk about, you've used a number of nautical metaphors in our conversations. The one that I noted in my book, Stratospheric CEOs, was around the seaplane, the surfer, the snorkeler, and the scuba diver. And I've loved that. I use that all the time with clients, and I do always credit you, just as an FYI. Can you speak more to that? Because that for me is such a it just speaks to me. Oh gosh, have you added more?
So I did this yesterday for it. So it surf, snorkel, scuba, because, as a leader, as a human, surf often, snorkel sometimes, and scuba by appointment. Like you really should be pulled down as a leader to get in that level of detail. And I would argue in a 0 through 4, the seaplane is the moment, that's maybe a crisis moment you really have to surveil. You've had a ransomware attack. Somebody's lost at sea. You're trying to figure out like a riptider, right? So seaplanes, you don't want to, I would argue seaplanes are survival only.
Yeah.
You're probably operating too high as a leader. Surfing, you're right on the surface of the firm or your life, and you're really riding those waves. And that's a little bit like that Thomas Friedman book. So I like that whole, snorkeling, sometimes you dip in, you kind of see what's going on. It's fun. You really got to scuba by appointment, like be brought down. And I added a 5th, which is spelunking. Never go into the caves. They're terrifying, bats, and there's probably no good that could go that deep. Maybe unless you have a ransomware attack. So, seaplane, surf, snorkel, scuba, never splunk.
Splunking.
Focus. Yeah, so I have to land on the prime numbers, so I got there by the 5 S's, but it's an SQ because it's the 3 in the middle you want to laser in on. 0 is seaplanes, 4 is splunk, which is not a prime, which is why you exit out.
But I love the visual, and it really speaks to me. And sometimes, you might be in survival mode as an organization, so you do need to be that seaplane. I suppose, when COVID hit or 9/11 financial crisis, there is the zooming out at that high altitude, but then it's the zooming in. And out of interest, is it something intuitively when to go seaplane to surfer to snorkeler to scuba dive? Is it intuition, or how do you recognize where you need to move between?
Maybe data, which is instinct.
Yeah, which
experience.
It comes from experience.
And you probably don't know it all the time. It's just something you kind of wander into a little bit.
When we talk about instinct and data, it made me think about failure. You and I have talked about failure before. And when it comes to innovation, failure is often part of the journey. And you shared with me, and I love the way you described this. You said failure is a feature, not a bug. And success is not final and failure is not fatal. Can you speak to that? And you mentioned it, Lance, and they all remember every one of their failures. It won't necessarily recall all their successes, but failure is a feature, not a bug. Speak to that.
So this one, I'm going to wander a little bit with Ray Kurzweil. And I learned a lot just in the last year. So there's this part of your brain that is deep and instinctual, and you do not think about what you do. It happens. It's like a breath, thinking about it. And there's things that you actually physically do, like, fight or flight. Like they're really wired into your brain that way. And we as humans have that from way back. Over time, I guess, our neocortex has developed more. And because of our opposable thumb versus primate, we have been able to both think of things and build them. And the building of them and the thinking of them has circulated and grown that neocortex to a tremendous size, to the point that our brain shape has changed, our skull has changed, so the physical brain has changed, the skull has changed. So if I think of how we are wired as humans now, given that neocortex is so dominant and we have so many X triggers and Facebook triggers and right, there's so many things hitting that conscious. There is a very subconscious instinctual thing. And you're probably seeing some of those things play out. Like people are in fight or flight and their instinct is to say, do this. And can't we just think a little bit more about that as like a human who might have evolved just slightly? And that's like a real, like he wrote a book in 12 on the mind. This is 24. He wrote the original of this in 07. And he believes we're going to really take biology and tech, merge it to the point where 500-year-old people easy are going to come in the next 5 to 10. I love that point because I've got my own personal battle going on, obviously. Not me, but my life and my wife. So I think about that a lot. And I think about like the brain is interesting and we're obviously trying to replicate it through these models. I'm not sure that's possible, but it will change a lot of how we behave and what we do physically.
I love that. And look, I want to pivot. We talked about failure. I also understand a little bit about, I don't know if winning's the right word, but I do think it's winning. What do you think of if we think of winning as a recipe card and there's ingredients on that recipe card and they're not vague ingredients like flour, butter, sugar. It's that, there's some specificity to the ingredients. What do you see as the ingredients for success?
So I'll take my market sort of CDS history. Like we did a lot to build a market from 2001 on in credit derivatives. And by we, I mean Lance in the front, many people around this whole, at least from a data perspective. So we conquered, right? We conquered building an industry around credit default swaps and finding a way to ensure the risk of a default, which was great, and take a view on that name. Maybe we got a bit complacent as the winning and the money flows. And then, yes, we did have a crisis in 08-09. I'm not sure if it was caused by that or exacerbated by that, or that collided with other things. I'd argue it was mass complacency, a lack of data, and people running away with a lot and not, a lot of, dough, which is, it's not the first or last time that will happen. So I think about that. And I think about all the winning we did through 07 and 8, and then 09 to 15 felt very different because we had many, many things we had to handle, including bringing the world back from the brink of crisis and resetting the whole industry regulatory-wise with Dodd-Frank and MiFID and all of these. So we named our planet market Fox 15 because we were trying to get back to the future by 2015 and get back to innovating again versus just solving for regs. Star 16, Fox, Star, and we sort of went off and then started to really get back to it by 20. And then we had another crisis that forced us to another level of mobility because of the pandemic. And now AI and quantum is going to take that and put it on more steroids, and that containment to convergence to collaborate is going to really do things that people have no idea about yet and can't possibly, like a penicillin moment.
The C cubed. Now, look, I'm conscious of time and we could spend hours and hours chatting, which we often do. But I wanted to take us into a very quick fire round. And so everything is short answer, so single word or short sentence. The secret to a fulfilling life is?
People. Most people get old and don't have a lot around them, and that's kind of why they decay so quickly.
It's true, isn't it? And you have to invest in relationships,
And your kids get married, people disappear naturally through time. So how do you keep community?
I'm never letting my children leave. My children are never leaving.
Well, I got a feeling they're going to have some. They may have some views.
Yeah, they so will be going, but as long as they still love their mum. One thing you can't live without.
Yeah, the primary is my wife, and the secondary is yoga.
Oh, love this. Morning lark or night owl?
Yes.
Which one? Both.
Correct. Yes. I wake up at 5 to 6 a.m. and I could go to bed at, I don't need a lot of sleep, and people tell me I'm crazy, but I don't think I need more than 5-6 hours really. And I will generally, I'm a night owl as a kid. I stuck that way. And when I got to the street, I became a morning owl, and now I'm just whatever.
And
morning bird.
Do you have an Aura ring or something that tracks your sleep? Okay. Cause I've just bought mine. And so what does it say when you have like 4 or 5 hours sleep? Does that influence your, they don't call it a recovery rate. I'm only day one
readiness,
of my readiness. Does that does that show up in the readiness?
Yeah, I would say more I sleep, the more it thinks I'm ready.
Okay.
Maybe if my body temperature is up too much, it's stress. My heart rate up is not a problem. It's the body temperature plus the heart rate. It means you're stressed. So yeah, I think those in general, there's some skew there. What I do know is I pee somewhat frequently some nights.
Okay. So that's
where my Oura ring tells me mostly.
And does the Oura ring does it do your temperature?
It doesn't do temperature, but the stress indicator is a combination, I believe, of your heart rate and stress. Because again, what you want is 98.5 degrees body temperature, even if your heart rate is 170.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to, because we like data. So I'm looking forward to the data it's going to offer me. A book you're currently reading, Apple in China. Ooh.
Yeah, how they kind of got caught in their supply chain and maybe have built a whole supply chain for China that's going to be repurposed. It's very interesting and somewhat controversial, but and a view on the leadership of Apple for sure.
Okay, that's one I'm going to be reading then as well. Favorite Netflix series?
Wasn't Netflix, but it is Vikings, and I found it through Lance, and it's kind of Game of Thrones, but better because it's almost real world.
Okay, I haven't watched that either. Okay, I feel like I've got a lot of good recommendations coming.
Yeah.
Somebody who inspired you early in your career?
Yeah, probably my professor at SUNY, Dr. Ron Forbes, who built this program, and it's the way I got to the street. And then I'd say Mike McCarthy at Goldman, who basically hired me. I had one interview at Goldman and got hired, which is very weird.
Yeah, because it's not about 100.
I met Mike, he hired me, and I had landed there in 3 weeks because he had a hole to plug in their power team. So that was, he was a really cool guy, like a bit of a rock star, Rolling Stone paintings, lived in his elevator opened to his apartment, which I couldn't imagine how people had that. That was kind of the coolest guy when I was 23.
See that in the movies.
Exactly. So, yeah.
A hidden talent you have?
Being quiet.
Oh, okay. Well, but don't be quiet when we catch up, because I always enjoy our conversations. Favorite meal?
Bumblebee tuna with real mayo on white toast, and maybe Wise potato chips crushed on top. I don't have a very advanced palate, maybe.
Your dream job outside of finance?
Space.
Joining Elon?
Space. There's a lot going on out there. We know a lot about it, but not nearly enough. And maybe the ocean, but space is kind of looking pretty cool these days.
A superpower you'd love to have?
Being quiet.
And a legacy you want to leave?
Systems that help people, I guess. It's a little bit like what I do, but it's just, can we build systems that actually really get things done in a good way and evolve, in a proper way when they need to? Yeah. Do we still need mainframes? I don't know.
I just hear the word impact there. Impact feels important. And look, I have, not only have I taken copious notes and taken such insight from our conversation, but it's also been enjoyable and such an engaging hour. So I appreciate you. And thank you for bringing your full self into this episode. And I look forward to many people listening to this episode.
I appreciate you, Georgie, fully, completely. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And look, I think anyone who's listening will be sending positive vibes over to Marcy. Fist pump you.
Jersey style.